Hello, everyone. We'll get started in just 1 minute. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Tru Faces Beyond the Label Conference. We're so excited to be here today. My name is Emily, and I will be your host. We're going to kick things off with some housekeeping items shortly, as well as an introduction to myself, my co-founder, Hannah, and Tru Faces. Then we'll get into some of our exciting lineup of speakers today. Starting with some housekeeping items, we ask that participants please keep themselves on mute for the duration of the conference. If you wish to engage in presentations or ask speakers questions, you're welcome to put something in the chat at any time. But we do ask that you keep yourself on mute. If you're looking for closed captioning, there is a button available at the bottom of your Google Meet screen that you can click to enable closed captioning. They are enabled individually, so you will need to turn that on yourself. As well, this conference today is being live streamed to our YouTube channel. So just to be mindful of, if you have your video on, it may be captured to an outside source. We invite all of you to share your experience today on social media with us. Please share your favorite moments, your favorite speakers, your takeaways, anything exciting that you learned. Feel free to tag us. We look forward to seeing your experience of today's speakers and everything that they have to share. So we're very excited for that. All right, let's jump into, I'm going to let Hannah introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone here today. So my name is Hannah. I am 20 years old, and I was born with a condition called Golden Hair syndrome. This has resulted in me having no right eye and no right hearing, as well as having a facial difference. And that may seem like a lot, but I am very grateful because my disability has allowed me to connect with each different community and make many friends along the way. I recently graduated from Fanshawe College with an advanced diploma in fashion design. Fashion has always been an important thing to me because even though I can't control what I look like, I can always wear clothes that make me feel comfortable and confident in my own skin. I also recently got into adaptive fashion through a summer internship with Runway of Dreams. Currently, I am taking it day by day and working on multiple projects, combining the two things I love most, which are fashion and disability.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hannah. My name is Emily. My pronouns are she, her. And like Hannah mentioned, I'm also a co-founder of Tru Faces. I myself am a registered early childhood educator. I graduated from that program in 2022 and then proceeded to do my postgraduate certificate in mental health and disability management, as well as I have a micro-credential in multisensory environments, which is a little bit of a side passion of mine. I myself am visually impaired. I was born with a condition called cone dystrophy, which has resulted in me being legally blind. So my vision is 20/200. What that means is that what a typical person who sees 20/20 vision can see 200 feet or meters away, I would have to be 20 meters away from in order to see kind of similarly. But my vision is also what we call a dynamic disability, meaning that it changes often based on the environment that I'm in. Oftentimes, I have a lot of light sensitivity. So if I'm in natural lighting or very bright lighting, I often squint. And I say it's similar to like when you turn up the exposure on a camera, everything gets very washed out and difficult to see. As well, I'm completely colorblind. So often things that are similar color tend to blend together, which makes it difficult to see them. My passions include watching Netflix, enjoying a good nap. As well, I also compete in pageants. So I currently hold the title of Miss Personality North America 2025/2026 and have held other titles within this system as well. My goal has always been to create and build that disability representation within the beauty and fashion industry, to create kind of a role model and increase that representation that we don't typically see. All right, so this conference today is hosted by Tru Faces. We've said it a couple of times now, and you may be wondering, if you're not familiar already, what is Tru Faces? And Tru Faces is an online community for individuals with disabilities where they can share their stories, educate about disability awareness, and really connect with other people who are facing similar challenges. I'm going to now pass it over to Hannah to share a little bit more about how Tru Faces came to be.
Thank you, Emily. So, Tru Faces started as a small Instagram page in November of 2018 with the goal to connect people with disabilities through social media. Growing up in a rural town, the only people Emily and I knew our age with vision loss were each other. It wasn't until we attended weekend programs at the School for the Blind that we met people like us. After the amazing friendships and support we found in the vision loss community, we wanted to break down barriers and give that same sense of connection to others. In almost 7 years since then, Tru Faces has carried that same goal and turned it into so much more.
You may be wondering, what are some of the programs and services that Tru Faces has to offer? Primarily, we serve both individuals with and without disabilities in both community and education kind of programming. So starting with people for disabilities, we have many ways to get involved, which we're also going to touch on towards the end of the call. But we have an ambassador program that we started in 2021, bringing together disability advocates. We do features on our Instagram page, which allow individuals with disabilities to share their story and lived experience with disability with the community. And then we also occasionally run virtual programming similar to this call, where, again, individuals with disabilities can kind of get together and engage in some fun things. Sneak peek, there may be some fall/Halloween trivia coming in late October. As well, for people kind of outside the disability community, we do public speaking initiatives as well. So we've been in schools and businesses to share kind of some misconceptions maybe about disability, our own lived experience with disability. And then lastly, if you haven't noticed already, both Hannah and I are wearing our Tru Faces advocacy apparel. So we sell t-shirts, hoodies, hats, tote bags, stickers, etc. To create disability awareness out in the community. We have different symbols on the back of our products to really start conversations about what they mean and what it means to have a disability, to kind of, again, continue to break down those misconceptions, stereotypes, etc. So we're very excited to have many different avenues in which people can get involved in, out in the community, online. We've been able to touch so many different countries and even continents around the world and share and connect with people. So it's been a wonderful ride. Now, the purpose of today's conference is really to create a space of advocacy and awareness, just like our brand's kind of goals, through storytelling and highlighting the lived experiences of individuals with a variety of disabilities. I was actually saying to Hannah earlier, I think all of our speakers today have pretty much different disabilities, which is very exciting. We're going to hear from many different perspectives. The idea actually stemmed from an ambassador within our team, and so we're excited to be able to bring it to life today. One of the reasons that we chose the name Beyond the Label is that people with disabilities often get assigned a label of disabled, and prehistorically it has been used kind of in a negative context. It's been seen as you live with a disability and that you are kind of less than or not as capable as. And so today we want to both accept the label, the word disability, because we do believe that there's a lot of empowerment in it. Our shirts actually have the word disability on them, but with the disc crossed out, because we want to focus on ability, but we don't want to get rid of the meaning behind the word disability and the empowerment that it can give to individuals, while also, understanding that there is way more exciting things that we are beyond the label of disability. So sharing experiences today that we hope will help reframe our understanding of disability without erasing it, and sharing those experiences to really show that there is so much more to us as people with disabilities than just our disability. A quick overview of the agenda for today. Shortly, we're going to kick off our first keynote speaker, followed by several speakers after that. So our second speaker, Nathan, is going to kick off around 1 p.m., followed by a short break from 1:30 to 1:40. At 1:40, we have our panel presentation from our ambassadors. And then lastly, followed by Michayla, our final speaker, at 2:20. We'll wrap up with some closing remarks at 2:50 before ending at 3 o'clock. We've got a jam-packed day, so we don't want to wait too much longer. However, my last kind of housekeeping note is that at the end of today's session, during those closing remarks, we will be doing a prize draw for all of those who are attending on our Google Meet call today. We'll be giving away a tote bag and a set of stickers. If you already have those products, we'll work something out though, because we know that we have a lot of community members on the call today. So automatically, everybody who is on the call today will be entered in to win that prize draw. However, we do have questions between speakers that will give you the opportunity to earn bonus entries by sharing the answer to that question in the chat. So to start it off, we're actually going to ask our first question to gain you a bonus entry, which is, what year was Tru Faces founded in? So that's, what year was Tru Faces founded in? Pop your answer in the chat to get an additional entry into our prize draw. Alrighty. With that said, I'm going to kick it off with our first speaker, Mike Shoreman. Mike Shoreman's life exemplifies persistence, resilience, and incredible transformation. Renowned for his authenticity and influential mindset, Mike addresses how to confront uncertainty and fear with positivity and success. As a gifted storyteller, he blends inspiration, likability, and candor, offering practical solutions for challenging situations based on his remarkable journey. As a nationally recognized coach with Paddle Canada, Mike's life changed dramatically when he was diagnosed with Ramsay-Hunt syndrome in 2018. This condition led to severe physical impairments, including loss of mobility, hearing, and vision, chronic vertigo, and a facial nerve collapse, culminating in a mental health crisis. After a grueling physical rehabilitation and mental health recovery, Mike found a new purpose. Defying medical expectations, he returned to paddleboarding, ultimately making history in 2022 as the first person to paddle across all 5 Great Lakes. His journey supported national mental health organizations and raised significant awareness across Canada and globally. Mike's Great Lakes Crusade and his own experience underscore that resilience can be built through facing everyday challenges. Please help me in welcoming Mike.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that lovely introduction. So nice to be here with you all. I love seeing all of the hand clap emojis in the chat there. Thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you, Tru Faces, and for Hannah with your work in putting on this incredible event today. I want to start off today by asking a question, and I want you to think about this not just now, but throughout this entire, throughout our time together. So I want to pose this. What if the labels that people gave us were just the beginning, not the definition of who we are? Society likes to put people in boxes. We hear words of disabled and limited and different. And what that does is it classify, or the purpose of that really is to classify and to categorize people. But, you know, we are so much more than just one thing. So it's, you know, significantly hard to put people into, you know, one category, like disabled. You know, you might be disabled and have disabilities, but you are so many other things at the same time too. And it's important that we remember that. You know, the beyond the label theme for this conference is so inspiring. You know, it allows us to discover possibility. It allows us to, you know, think about what our purpose is, the things that we wake up for every day, and go to sleep thinking about, excited about the next for the next day, and it helps us also in building resilience, which I'll talk about a little bit. I'm going to start off with my story, to get us going here, and then some lessons that I've learned that hopefully, you know, you might take some nuggets away from. But I really want you to think, throughout all of this, about that question: what if the labels that people gave us were just the beginning, not just the definition of who we are? So let's start with the story. You know, before the disability, you know, who was I? I was a student. I was a graduate. I was a friend. I was an entrepreneur. I was an athlete. I was a business owner. I taught paddleboarding as a profession in Toronto. I ran a very successful water sport business. For those of you who don't know what paddleboarding is, they say it is a mixture of surfing and kayaking or canoeing. You use a paddle, and you can do it recreational. People do it recreationally for fun, or they do it competitively. There was a national championships in Canada. There is a world championships. They are trying to get it into the Olympics right now, the Olympics and the Paralympics. And yeah, so I learned how to paddleboard as a hobby, and I fell in love with the sport, just being around water and being around people and teaching. I found it very fulfilling, and that was my purpose. And it lit me up. And at the end of my season in 2018, because you can only paddle. Well, some people paddle in the winter, but not many, because of the weather. Most people don't want to be out on Lake Ontario or any of the lakes in -20, -30. So I'd close down for the winter. So it was nice. Gave me some time to recharge. And in November, I got very sick that year. And we didn't know what it was at first. But ultimately, what it was a reactivation of my chickenpox virus. So if you've had chickenpox, I was born in the early 1980s. I believe you got vaccinated at schools for chickenpox now. But back then, I didn't, and I had chickenpox. So if you've had chickenpox as a kid, as a child, it lays dormant in your system. And it can reemerge when you're older. And when it reemerges, it presents as shingles. So throughout my entire life, I always thought of shingles as an old person, problem situation. My grandmother had shingles. What I know from that is that it was very painful for her. She got it in her 80s. It was excruciatingly painful. And she was on bed rest for several weeks, and 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 then it eventually went away. But once you have shingles, it can come back again and again and again. So what Ramsay-Hunt syndrome is, it's when you have chickenpox reactivating as shingles, but it attacks either your eye or your ear. And in my case, it attacked my ear. And because it attacked my ear, it affected what's called the vestibular system. And the vestibular system controls our equilibrium and our sense of balance. So I went from being on the water, standing on the water, teaching people how to paddleboard, to not being able to walk. And it presented other symptoms or other parts of this as well. I've lost vision, not complete vision, but I've got obstructed vision in my right eye. I have obstructed hearing and hearing loss, profound hearing loss in my right ear, as well as right now tinnitus. I can hear the ocean, and it really affected me. Vertigo is a big part of my condition. When I turn my head from side to side, I won't do that for demonstration. But when I turn my head from side to side, or when I'm walking on unpaved surfaces, I can get very, very dizzy. So in the beginning of this, this was devastating. It was a big shock to my nervous system. It was a big shock to my family. It was a traumatic event. I woke up one morning and all of the nerves in my face had collapsed, and it looked like I'd had a stroke. So I was now dealing with a newfound facial difference, which I still have today. When I smile, there's been a lot of healing in 6 years, but when I smile, I still have a crooked smile, and but at the time it looked like I'd been in a traumatic accident, and it was devastating to live through that. The change of that, and not just the change of that, but what that meant. It meant the loss of my business. It meant the loss of independence. Suddenly, I was needing caretakers. I was needing someone to help bathe me and to help feed me in certain scenarios. To help, I couldn't. I'm drinking out of a coffee cup today, but I couldn't drink without using a straw because of the facial difference with my mouth at the time. Things looked very, very different, and that was not just hard for me, but also hard for the people who were all around me, my close friends and my family, who were taking me. Um, but but essentially, that is how disability entered my life. It entered my life in 2018. In early 2019, I had a mental health breakdown, because I was being sent to physiotherapists, and I was being sent to neurologists and to audiologists, and a big focus was being put on my physical health, but not on my mental. And a big part of this is change. So sorry, just one second. I'm just going to bring up a note here. Is the changes that we go through, and how we adjust and how we adapt. And in that moment, I didn't have the coping strategies and support that I really needed. Um, so so before all of this, um, my views on disability were very different. I have learned a lot over this period of time. Today, I'm very fortunate that I am an accessibility educator with the Rick Hansen Foundation. I'm a public speaker on disability and mental health education. I work with schools, government organizations, and businesses all across Canada, which is, it's incredible that in 6 years, with the support of, incredible people in my life, we've been able to turn, what was a very difficult situation at the moment, and turn it around so quickly. I'm also an author. I've authored 2 books, um, where I talk about mostly Canadian mental health, and in the latest one, I do talk about persons with disabilities, and some of their experiences, but how the labels that society gives us. Um, I remember being told that I couldn't do things anymore. Um, I will never forget being inside a doctor's office with my dad in early March. The event happened in November, and I remember being in that doctor's office in March, the following March, and at that point, some time had passed. I was using a cane to walk. I had an eye patch to protect my eye. I couldn't blink with my face with the nerves collapsed. So I was wearing an eye patch, and I was just in a very vulnerable state. And I'll never forget what the doctor said. The doctor said, "No, because of the vertigo, because of the mobility, because of all of these challenges, your paddleboarding's done. You'll never paddleboard again." Um, Long car rides are probably out. No more road trips to Florida, no more road trips to Chicago or Nova Scotia, places where I've been to. Um, and flying is going to be very, very challenging. And you know, I was basically being told, you know, this is who you are now. And I think that a lot of us um, face these conversations projected onto us by others with their views and thoughts on what we are now capable of. And in that moment, because I was in a vulnerable state, and I think many people are when they acquire their disabilities later in life. Um, there was no experience. My father had limited experience with disability, so he didn't know the questions to ask, or he knew let's get a second opinion and see what somebody else says. But he wasn't trained to be the biggest and the best advocate in that situation. So that was also being put on him, that I was being told, this is what you can't do anymore, and this is who you are now. And I think that's something that is not just given by doctors. That is something that is given by teachers. That is given by um, different people of authority. Anyone really who has an opinion about a person with disability, whether it's positive or negative, they will have their own thoughts on, oh, this is probably what this person is capable of, and and it can be challenging. So from there, everything changed. I closed my business, and I moved into something else. I started working with, as my mental health improved, so did my physical health. I began working with mental health organizations in Canada. Jack.org is one of my favorite youth mental health charities. They help youth empower other youth by leading peer-to-peer support programs. So I started running events to help raise funds and awareness for them. And as my mental health started, or as my mental health started to improve, so did my physical. And I got back on a board. And I'll never forget the first time that I ever got back on a paddleboard after that doctor said, your paddleboarding's done. I only lasted a few minutes that first day, but it was enough to give me confidence that maybe the next time we could last 5 minutes. And then perhaps the week after we could try for 10 minutes. And then we could slowly start using what we call incremental win building, taking our small wins and turning them into bigger wins, and then bigger wins from that. And ultimately that led to getting back on a paddleboard. And from there, that led to standing up on a paddleboard 4 months later. And then that led to me attempting to cross Lake Ontario to raise funding and awareness for Jack.org in 2021. In 2021, with the help of an incredible team, we made it halfway across Lake Ontario. I didn't make it across on my first time, but we made it halfway across. And it taught me and my team a lot about what is needed in terms of support, and the adjustments that would need to be made if we were going to try this again. And then the next year in 2022, we attempted and then crossed all 5 of the Great Lakes. Starting in May, we crossed Lake Erie, then we crossed Lake Huron, then Michigan, Lake Superior, and finally Lake Ontario. Some of these crossings took over 30 hours. If you see those people in the news who are out there swimming across the lakes, this takes a lot of time. Lake Ontario took me 23 hours to get across. Lake Michigan took 29 hours. So these were big marathons, and we adapted with my challenges, with my vision, with my hearing impairments. Being on the water, I wasn't on the water by myself. It was me over here, and then 10 feet away was my team on a motorboat. And every 30 minutes they'd blow a whistle, and I'd come over to the boat and they'd throw food at me or protein shakes, and then I would keep going. And we would do that for 30 hours until it was finished, or whenever it was finished. But being on the water with challenges or differences or disabilities, it meant that we had to adapt. It meant that I always had to be on one side of the boat if I wanted to hear what was being spoken to me. Because if I was on the right side of the boat with my hearing impairment, combined with wind, and noise of the water, I wouldn't hear them. Also, going through these crossings. You'd start in the early morning, and then you'd go through the day and into the night, and through the night into the morning again. So you're going through different. We're going through, different light factors, and navigating water through the dark for somebody who has visual impairments is a challenge. So we had to come up with solutions for that, and they also had to keep their eyes on me for safety, for my safety. So we had to troubleshoot and figure out, all these different ways that, 6 years earlier, if I'd attempted to do this, we wouldn't have had as many things to do, or as many situations that we had to work out. So I want to just jump into kind of resilience over restriction. So there are so many people, and I can't name how many, more than on one hand, more than all the fingers on two hands, so many people who I've come across throughout since 2018, since the health event happened, where people assumed that I couldn't do certain things. There were people who had doubts about me crossing Lake Ontario. And you know what? The first time I didn't make it across, so maybe their doubts were valid in part. But we did cross it the second year, and we did prove them otherwise. Disability may change how we do something, but it doesn't take away from our ability to create impact. And most importantly, resilience is not about bouncing back to who we were. It's about building forward into who we want to become. I think it's incredibly inspiring. Hannah and Emily spoke earlier about the purpose of Tru Faces, and how they didn't have anyone in their own communities who was doing this. So they decided to do this themselves. That is true leadership, and I think you see leadership a lot within the disability community. You see people, my friend Lauren McDonald, she's a celebrated lawyer in Toronto. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she, she is hearing impaired. She's deaf, and she created the see-through masks that people use in hospitals, out in public while they're grocery shopping. She saw that as a big concern and a problem area for persons with disabilities, for people who were deaf, and those masks, the clear masks, where you can where it gave people the opportunity to, if I was wearing a clear mask, they could lip read, and the other masks that most of us wore, they didn't have that opportunity. So we see leadership and resilience in different ways, and it really comes from really just wanting to make things better, and showing up that way. I think a big thing that many of us deal with is support. and how support works with disability. We all, whether we have disabilities or not, we all need support. We all need help. But inclusion, and help from people who are around us is important, and even us supporting and helping and including people ourselves who are within the community. One of my favorite examples of this is was my friend Kevin Kellens, and this makes me very sad. Kevin um, Kevin created a campaign called Peddling Possibilities. Peddling Possibilities saw him and his partner pedal across Canada to create an accessible path for persons with disabilities. Kevin was a quadriplegic, and he began his campaign. He did the route that Terry Fox did in 2023, and he went from Newfoundland all the way to BC. I believe it took him four or 5 months, and I was very upset to learn last year that Kevin passed away. But what Kevin saw was this opportunity for leadership and to create something impactful. And he wanted to, I believe he wanted to leave a legacy behind to show people what is possible, peddling possibilities, but also to give people something that he had to go out and find. He had to go out and find a route that is acceptable for people with disabilities if they want to do their own campaigns or if they want to go from one side of the country to another. So it's very, we all have these big ideas and these big dreams, but it's also incredibly important to have the support. Kevin didn't do that campaign behind. He had a partner, one of his best friends, her name is Sarah, and she went along with him on her bicycle, and accompanied him for 5 or 6 months. And it was, he had that support. He had the support of his community. He had the support of many communities across Canada that he pedaled through. And it just goes to show that, we can accomplish a lot on our own, but we can accomplish so much more when we work together. And it's inspiring to see what happens when we do come together. So that is one of the things that I want to leave you with here. I felt incredibly supported throughout my Great Lakes crossings. When I didn't, you don't cross a Great Lake by yourself. You cross it with a team. You cross it with communication, and you cross it with trust, and you cross it with friendship, and all these things that we need to get through each day. Kindness and love. And there are hard moments where I didn't want to go on anymore. And I'm sure that there are hard moments in Tru Faces where, there might be some frustration, and there might be, one person might need some more encouragement, and the other person is there. And I think that transcends beyond just disability, disability. That goes for everybody. But no, I think it's incredibly important. And then finally, the last thing that I really want to touch on is how, and Emily kind of touched on it earlier on, is how we speak to ourselves. Throughout, this is called the Beyond the Label conference. I'm not just a person with a disability. I'm not just I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I'm a friend. I'm an accessibility and mental health consultant. I'm a person who has a cold and who has to blow my nose right now. You can laugh at that. But how people talk about us can be really impactful on each of us. So how we talk about ourselves is incredibly important. How we talk about ourselves to ourselves and how we talk about ourselves to others. So one of the biggest challenges for me in my Great Lakes Crossings campaign was that I got a lot of media attention. I think in 3 months, I did 192 TV, radio, and newspaper interviews. Breakfast Television, People Magazine, the cover of the Toronto Sun. There was a lot of interest and attention, which was great. And the purpose of that campaign was to create awareness. So it was wonderful. It was raising a lot of funding, and it was raising a lot of awareness, and it was helping a lot of people. At the same time, there were things that came with that were incredibly hard. And one of the things that came with that was how the media wanted to portray me. And the media wanted to portray me as a person who was different, who was challenged, who was at times weak or weaker than maybe somebody else. And they wanted to project it as this story of a comeback, which is fine. I saw their point, but at the same time, they put a label on me. And the label that they put on me, and you can Google this, if you Google Mike Shoreman and then go to news, all the news articles will come up. But it said almost, I would say, for the first 3 months, so the first 3 or 4 Great Lakes, I didn't start fighting back on it until afterwards. But they said, and please welcome to the show, Mike Shoreman, the first person with disabilities who's attempting to paddleboard across all 5 lakes. And I thought, oh wow, that's really great. Like, that's really nice. And I had to kind of sit with that for a while, to realize that they were getting it wrong. They were getting the label wrong. I'm a person who lives with disabilities, but I was the first person, period, to cross all 5 Great Lakes on a paddleboard. I wasn't the first person with disabilities. I have disabilities. That's part of it. But I was the first person to do it. So this was something, a label that they were putting on me that was factually incorrect. And by the time that I realized that that was happening, I started acting out on it. I started correcting the newscasters. I started correcting the reporters. I started correcting the journalists. Because it was factually incorrect, and I wanted them to understand that is part of this. It's not all of it. And I wanted them to understand that so that they could educate the public properly. And respectfully, they took that information and they helped. So it was significant. So yeah, I want to leave you with that sometimes it's also our responsibility to teach and to educate and to show others this is actually what is happening. This is the situation, these are the facts. And there's no harm in educating and advocating for ourselves. And it's something that I want to leave all of you here with, because there is nobody who is going to advocate for you harder than you. So when I look at my own journey, I see that labels were, never the end of my story. They were just the beginning of rewriting it. So, for people with disabilities who are on the call and who might watch this conference now or later, you are more than a word. You are a possibility. You are potential that is unfolding right now, here today, in front of everybody. And for the allies and for the organizations and for the leaders, look, I challenge you to look beyond the label, see the person, see, every person, every human being is unique. They bring qualities and uniqueness and we just learned about Hannah's passion in fashion and Emily's. I followed Emily for a few years now, and I've known her as as the pageant queen. So she's more than a pageant queen. She's multifaceted, as we all are. But I challenge you to look beyond the label, see the person, not just for their disability, see them for who they are, see them for their values and their morals and their kindness and the actions and the inactions that they may take, and invest in their potential. Because when we do, you don't just change a life, you change the world. And you do that by investing in people with disabilities one day at a time. I want to just, I hope all of you leave here today feeling inspired. Michayla and Nathan are going to be fantastic. We're going to have excellent stories to share. And this is just a day of learning and education that's been, curated by two wonderful, inspiring people. So I'll just leave you, with one final thought. Beyond the label lies greatness, and beyond the label lies all of us. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Mike. I wish we could hear everybody's round of applause, but I know we'll see some reaction buttons. But wow, I have goosebumps. Even just that last line in itself, you've absolutely nailed it on the head, and I think that's the perfect way to start off today, thinking about all of the things we are outside of while it's important that like our disabilities are a part of who we are, they are a part of that story, like you were saying, like being able to share them afterwards and say, I'm also all of these amazing things. And I love that you shared that you were rewriting that narrative. Because as much as we, social media and the news is getting so much better about how we're portraying people with disabilities, it also perpetuates stereotypes. And it can be so hard to have the courage and confidence to go up against that and say, hey, this is actually like, this is wrong. Or, saying that, it's absolutely, like, a part of it is that I have a disability and I'm creating this awareness, but like to be the first person, period, to try and do that is absolutely incredible. And I commend you for being able to kind of stand up against that and feel empowered to make that change. And it takes so much work from us as a community to be able to do that and make sure that we feel represented accurately in those media opportunities. So thank you for sharing your story and leaving us with that message. I think you hit the nail on the head. It was absolutely perfect.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, if you were listening enough to Mike, you should be able to answer our next prize question. If you're joining us a little bit later, we are doing a prize draft for all of those, the individuals who join us throughout the conference today, as well as there's opportunities to earn bonus entries like right now. So drop your answer to the question in the chat to get that bonus entry. And the question is, how many Great Lakes are there? So how many Great Lakes are there? Write that answer in the chat to get an extra bonus entry into our prize draw at the end. Excellent. Alrighty, next we are going to move on to our second speaker of the day, Nathan Clement. And for Nathan, what matters most is how well you walk through the fire, which is a quote that he finds defines his life best. A two-time Paralympian, Paris 2024 silver medalist, three-time paracycling world champion, and recipient of the King's Coronation Medal, Nathan shares his journey growing up as a stroke survivor and the pursuit of a Paralympic medal. Through his story, Nathan highlights the power of possibility and recovery in disability, the strength of resilience, and the importance of community while laying the foundation for the next generation. So please help me in welcoming Nathan. Nathan, I will pull your presentation up now.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm Nathan Clement. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you, Mike, for being so vulnerable and open about your story. It was amazing hearing everything you've gone through, but also being able to do 5 Great Lakes is absolutely incredible. But let's get into my story. My Paralympic journey began July 6, 1997, when I suffered a stroke paralyzing the left side of my body. At that age and at that time of 2 years old, I didn't know what was happening, but for my mom and for my dad, a dark cloud, a hurricane, a earthquake had hit us and they didn't know what to do. And through those coming days, weeks, and months, a lot of challenges came up early on. And as I slowly regained my ability to talk, my ability to move my right side, little bits of hope were seeping through. And about a year after the stroke, a community came in called the BC Centre for Ability. And with the BC Centre for Ability, it allowed me to see occupational therapists. It allowed me to see speech therapists and have that opportunity and chance just to play, but also move my muscles, move my arms, and also speak, talk with different activities like climbing, jungle gyms, playing What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf, singing, dancing, all these different exercises that allowed me to be a kid at the end of the day. And for myself and for my parents, hope started to come through. And as I grew from the ages of 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, started getting into school, and a lot of challenges came that way with bullying from kids in my school. But that little bit of community from the BC Centre for Ability kept shining through. And as I got a little older, my sister, my brother started playing different sports. My brother was a soccer player. My sister was a gymnast, and I would go to their events. I would go to their games as a kid, and I would watch. I would cheer them on every time they got a ball, or my sister would do somersaults. And I spent so long on the sideline, I wanted to try. I wanted to get into sport. And at the age of 9, I had a conversation with my mom, with my dad, about trying soccer. And just so happened to be the first soccer team I got put on had a star-studded lineup, especially for our age and for the age of 9, where there's a couple guys that would go on to play in the NHL on that team. And here I was a kid who could barely run, barely kick a soccer ball on a team with future NHL stars and the top athletes for our age group. And on my slide, there's a photo of me about 5-10 seconds from everyone else while everyone else is on the line waiting for the next drill to start. I was behind everyone. I was not at that same level they were at that moment. And as that final practice came to an end on that gravel field, my mom, my dad, and I were walking off the pitch. And as we walked off the pitch, our coach called me out and called me over. And at this moment, my mom, my dad, and I all were of the mindset of, this conversation's not going to go well. This is going to be one of those conversations where the coach says, hey, it was great you showed up, but maybe this isn't the team for you. Maybe this isn't the place for you at this moment. However, that man, John Lucky, pulled me aside and said, Nathan, you did a great job today. I want you to work on your ball handling and ball control for the next practice. And that little instance of hope, that little instance of, hey, you're here, you're present, you're a team member, catapulted me forward. And with the support of my mom, my dad, and especially John, I learned very early on as a kid with a stroke, as a kid with a disability, I might not be the fastest runner. I might not be the most talented, the most gifted, the most athletic athlete, but there was one thing I could be, and that was the hardest worker. And throughout that season, that first year in soccer, I was put in big situations. I was put in big moments that allowed me to have that confidence, whether it was our championship game trying to shut down a striker, or just throughout the year doing small little things that made that difference to help that team, whether it's slide tackle, get a ball, or do the small little things. It built that confidence for me. And as I started to grow, I fell in love with the beautiful game. I fell in love with soccer. I fell in love with football. And getting to play week in, week out, a ref noticed me. A ref noticed my impairment and noticed my disability and got my family connected to the Canadian Cerebral Palsy soccer team, or now known as Soccer 7-a-side. And at the age of 12 years old, I was on a pitch with former European professional players playing 7-a-side soccer, seeing athletes who are adults with similar disabilities to me and getting that chance to play. It gave that confidence, it gave that belief. And as I started to make the Canadian development squad, I was training weekly, daily, just going out there trying to reach that dream of going to a Paralympics, going to represent my country in my favorite sport, favorite game. And as I turned 13, 14 years old, my coach sat me down and told me I needed to work on my conditioning. I needed to work on my fitness. And he wanted me to pick up a second sport. And as I searched, I tried to find different activities, different sports I could do. I landed on swimming, a sport that I did when I was a kid, when I was recovering from my stroke, and I fell in love with swimming. And as soccer started to rise and as swimming started to rise in the early bits of my childhood, expectations were starting to come. Expectations of making national teams, of representing Canada at the highest level were on my sight and on my mind. And with that work ethic of being the hardest worker, I pushed myself. I went beyond probably what I could have done. And when I set that expectation so high, I became my biggest critic and unfortunately my biggest bully. And whenever I would have a bad practice, a bad day, I would pick on myself. And as someone who wanted to support others, but not support myself, I kept a lot of my feelings internal. And it began a downward spiral of mental health. At the ages of 14, 15, 16 years old, I struggled with my mental health, and I'm very fortunate to be here today throughout those struggles and those tough moments. And as I just kept pushing myself, I had to make a choice at the age of 17, whether I stick with soccer or if I transition to swimming. And at this point, I was receiving money from the Canadian national team in 7-a-side soccer. And I was just on the cusp of making the national team in swimming. However, with the Rio 2016 Paralympics few years away, soccer was out of the games. And as much as I loved the sport, I wanted to go to the Paralympics. So I switched fully from soccer to swimming in that pursuit of 2016. And as the years passed by, 2013, I missed the team. But in 2014, I made my first national team. But I pushed myself so hard and beyond my breaking point that as soon as I finished my race and the adrenaline of realizing I made the Canadian roster kind of went through the system, I realized I torn a muscle in my right shoulder. And as someone who can only use one arm, losing your functioning limb isn't really ideal. And I spent the next several months recovering, pushing myself to get back in the pool. And that lesson that I thought I learned reared its head again, where in early 2015, I was walking on my pool deck in my hometown of West Vancouver. And as I was walking, my vision went blurry. My ability to speak disappeared, and I collapsed to the ground. And at this point, there was fears of another stroke. There was fears of a brain aneurysm. It ended up being a virus because I pushed myself so hard and beyond my breaking point. And as a athlete and as someone who just wants to live a healthy lifestyle, you learn a lot about yourself when you're taken in an ambulance at 7 p.m. in the freezing January cold of -10 in Vancouver, just in a swim trunk. And that's a little bit of a reality check there. And as I came back to the pool, as I came back to the training, I needed to have a conversation with my coaches. My coaches sat me down and we had that conversation of balancing my physical health. And with that prioritized, with that really taken care of, I was able to qualify and represent Canada at the Rio 2016 Paralympic Games. Reaching the games was that childhood dream come true. Although I was an athlete who was an outsider on that team, I was someone who was expected to be in Rio in 2016. And I heard it from coaches. I heard it from teammates, with even one teammate telling me, I shouldn't be here. I don't belong to be at the Rio 2016 Paralympics. And as soon as I heard that, I realized this isn't for them. This is for me and my family and everyone who's helped me get to this moment, get to this chance where we get to celebrate all that work that has been done. And as the Rio Games came closer, and as we got to Rio, racing in front of 16,000 people in the pool was one of the most beautiful and incredible experiences that allowed me to finish 7th, just riding the momentum of the games and riding that momentum of having fun and enjoying the experience catapulted me to that final where I finished 7th. But as the games came to an end in 2016, my struggles with mental health started to rise, and it eventually led to that point where I needed to have that conversation with my parents, with my family, with everyone close to me. And as I opened up about my mental health, I felt weight coming off my back. I felt weight coming off my shoulder, and that vulnerability and that fear of people judging me, that fear of me being seen as a burden that plagued me throughout my teenage years to early adulthood faded away. And I realized I was like everyone else, and everyone else has been through similar experiences like me, unfortunately, and it let me open up. And as I reached a great mental place in 2017 and 2018, I realized I needed a switch in my life. At the age of 23, I retired from swimming in 2018. I was a Tokyo 2020 medal favorite. I was a medal hopeful. And I realized I needed to take care of my mental health. So in 2018, I hung up the goggles, hung up the cap, and retired. And as I left the swimming pool where I had my race in Edmonton, I knew I just needed to separate. I needed to separate from everything and find that new path, find that new direction. And in 2018, I embarked on a 6-month backpacking trip, going around the world solo. And as that trip began, and as I got 2 months, 3 months, 4 months into that trip, I had a thought running in the back of my mind of how amazing would it be to see and experience the world by the most interactive, the most immersive way possible, by bike. And as I came home in early 2019, I had a dream, I had a vision to bike pack around the world and set the record for the fastest person with disability to bike around the world. And as the training began in 2019 and into 2020, the confidence, the belief, the realization that this could be something I could actually attempt as I started planning my schedule, as I started planning the route, as I started realizing how much it was actually going to cost. We all know what happened in 2020. And I put a lot more important things to the forefront, like being there for my mom, being there for my grandmother, being there for everyone around me during the time of COVID-19. And in the province of British Columbia, the restrictions loosened in the summer of 2020, which allowed me, my dad, and our French bulldog at the time, Lulu, to see if I could even handle this multi-100-day event that we were going to try to do in 2 weeks. So with the support of my father, we drove from Vancouver all the way to the BC-Alberta border in Fernie. Starting there, with the supports of my dad and Lulu, I began that trip. And as I was seeing these beautiful countrysides that British Columbia offers, the ranging peaks, the glimmering lakes, everything that BC offers, I started to feel this little burning fire coming back to me. And as I got home, that fire had engulfed me. I wanted to race. I wanted to compete. I wanted to give cycling a shot. But I knew from my past, I had to be honest. I had to realize that if I did this, I have to respect my mental health. So I sat down with my parents, talked to them about wanting to race, but talked to them about the vulnerability and the importance of respecting my mental health. And with those conversations taken care of and out of the way, I began my cycling journey in late 2020. And as the first year went by, I wasn't really able to see my coach because of COVID restrictions. But in 2022, I was able to get involved with the team more and more. And fortunately, in the summer of 2022, I qualified and made my first national team. A year later, at the 2023 UCI Road World Championships in Glasgow, Scotland, I won the world title. I won the world championship by 8 seconds. And that world championship title secured my ticket, secured my spot to the Paris Paralympic Games. A year out, I was going to my second Paralympics. A dream come true, something that didn't even seem possible 4 or 5 years ago had become a potential realization. But going into Paris, there was now expectations. Being a world champion puts that expectation of being a medalist at the games. And as the 2023-2024 season began, working on handling those expectations were the utmost priority that I had. And in late 2023 at the Para Pan Am Games, I was able to win gold in my main event of the time trial. And it just kind of showed we were on that right track. We were on that right placement, or so we hoped. In May of 2024, in a race in Belgium, I was going around a corner and I guess I mistimed it a little too much and I went right into a fence. And that was kind of the start of issues with the bike. After getting home after that race in Belgium, we made the adjustments we needed to, and we had begun the 3 months breakdown, the 3 months kind of runway we had till the Paris Paralympic Games in September of 2024. And at my first training camp of 3 in a town called Bromont, Quebec, I was out there riding, getting the experiencing the Quebec heat, because in BC we're so lucky with that coastal breeze that prevents that humidity that we were expecting that was going to happen in Paris. So Quebec was the perfect training ground for me. And on my second ride in Quebec, my coach and I had turned around a little early because we had a major rainstorm coming to hit us earlier than we expected. And as we began our turnaround back home, we started going down a hill. And with my trike, with the one wheel on the left, one wheel on the right, my wheel got caught in a crack in the road and I got sent catapulting off my bike, hitting the ground.
Don't get up from this table without cleaning up. This is literally
hitting the ground hard.
Okay.
Fortunately,
you got little sausage.
I was okay.
You got food.
But my bike was said to be okay. After looks and after checks by mechanics and by our coach, I was told everything was all right. 4 days later, descending down a hill again in Quebec, I guess it's my luck with hills, my free hub, the part of the bike that allows the chain, that allows the pedals, that allows everything to move forward, jammed, sending me catapulting down the road again. And at this point, the bike was not in good shape. And one of the things with adaptive equipment, as probably many people unfortunately know in this call, is a lot of these pieces and a lot of these parts are one of one. And when something's damaged, when something's broken, it's hard to find that replacement. Fortunately, a month later, we were able to find that piece. We were able to find that part that we needed. Getting back on the bike, about a month with broken equipment was challenging. It was tough, but we made it work. And as Paris started to loom closer, as July hit, as August hit, that belief, that confidence was starting to rise of this could be something amazing. This could be something exciting. And as we got to the village in Paris, the beauty, the sound, everything that's said about the Paris and just Paralympics and Olympics, the village makes you feel 10 feet taller. And as we got in there, the infamous cardboard beds, I don't know how many people heard about them or knew about them, but they were as bad as the media was saying, or even worse, especially for someone like me, as I have dystonia caused by the stroke. And whenever I move, whenever I motion myself, especially when I'm sleeping, I move around a lot. And as I was trying to get my sleep there, because of my condition and how hard and stiff the beds were, I would get 2-3 hours sleeps a night. And after about 3-4 days of very poor sleep and trying to request new mattresses, new stuff so I could be able to sleep at night, I had a full leg shutdown. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. And I was put in a place of, oh no, this is my biggest fear. Something out of my control is affecting me at this point. And as all this was going on, one of my best friends on the team crashed and his Paralympics were over. And with the mounting stress of the lack of sleep and even issues with the equipment I was given, of jerseys, of clothes that were provided, I started to not get nervous, but have to take a step back. Take a step back and see the perspective of the kid that I was when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, who struggled through those mental health challenges, that had a dream of going to a Paralympics, had a dream of getting to do a sport that he loved, that he cared about. And as that pressure started to mount, I kept telling myself, do it for the kid. Do it for that kid, because this would be his dream come true, to be told that, hey, he's going to a Paralympics and he has a shot at a medal. And as I started to have that conversations, I felt weights starting to come off. We were able to find a mattress. Shout out IKEA. IKEA came in clutch, and I was able to sleep. And as 5 days, 4 days, 3 days all came down to the night before race day, it was almost time to do the job, to do the thing we dreamed of, the thing we worked on for so long. And as we had our final team meeting the night before the time trial, before my race, I had a plan. We had a program of me going to bed, get up at 7, get to the course by about 9:30 for my 11:40 a.m. race. However, what we weren't told till that evening was the only shuttle I would be able to take from the village to the race course, which was over an hour away, was at 4:30 in the morning. Not ideal for 11:30, 11:40 start time, race time. So completely changing the plan, changing the script. I went to bed right away. Waking up at 4:30, I was exhausted, but so was everyone else in that situation. That's the side of the games they don't share. They don't say is it is those who are willing to go through the fight, go through the battle, are the ones who are going to come out on top. And just reminding myself of that, reminding myself of the dream, the opportunity, the chance. And as I got to the race course, I tried to sleep. I was unable to fall asleep. But it was just 14K, 14.2 kilometers from the start to finish of chasing a dream. And as I got through my warm-up, as I got to the race course, as I got to the race line, that tension, that excitement was starting to come up, that adrenaline rush of this could happen, this is exciting, this is an amazing opportunity. And as that countdown began of 10, 9, 8, till my go, I heard my mom and my dad screaming, go, go, go. And as soon as that beep went, we were off. And for my event, the time trial, every single cyclist is separated by a minute on the course. Every start is a minute apart. And with time trialing, the goal is to not be seen by anyone behind you, or even if you can, is pass the person in front of you with that minute difference. If you're passing someone, that's usually a sign you're doing well. If you're getting passed, that is usually not a great sign. And as that race began, I felt the strength, I felt the power, and I made it up our first climb of the race. And as I reached that crest of that hill, it was time to start our first descent. Flying down the hill, we had a sharp left-hand corner that had a slanted road on it. So for myself, on a tricycle-style bike, especially with my disability, being a left-hand corner, it's tough, it's challenging. So I had to take my time. I usually have to ease in to take that left-hand corner so I don't flip or I don't crash. And as I was bombing down the hill at 50K an hour, I started to ease on the brakes. And as soon as I hit the brakes, I felt a screeching sound and vibration come from my drivetrain, come from my free hub as it locked right off the bat. Not panicking, I was able to ease into that corner without pedaling and make it around there safe and okay. First hurdle over, done. let's move on. And as I continue to drive with my legs, I reached kilometer 3, kilometer 4, and we hit our first climb. And usually with my disability, with my condition, with resistance, my left arm likes to come off the handlebar. And often when I'm going up a hill at full tilt or full speed, I'll be riding with one hand on the bike. And usually what happens, once I get to the top of the hill, my arm will come back on the handlebar and everything will be good. Everything will be okay. However, could have been the weight of the moment, could have been the weight of the race. I reached that top of the hill and began my descent, and my left arm did not want to come on the handlebar. And I'm bombing down a hill at 35, 40K, trying to fight with my arm to get it onto the handlebar. And throughout this Paris course, there was amazing crowds, there was volume, there was noise everywhere. However, as soon as you hit this forest section 4 kilometers long, it was silence. It was just you, your breath, and the tires of the bike, or so I thought. As I was midway through the forest, I heard the wheels of my competitor, the guy I was going head to head with for the gold medal, come flying by me. And at that moment, it could have been over. I could have thought, oh no, I'm out of this. But instead, in that moment, I felt a calm of, okay, I have someone I can chase after right now. And as I had him in my sight, I tried to get as close as I could to him in the waning 3, 4, 5 kilometers to go. And with about 2K, we reached our final hill, our final climb. And as I started coming up that hill, I could see I was getting closer. I was rearing closer, and throughout every obstacle I've had going into that race, going into the Paralympics, and even on that race day, it felt like we had to climb one more mountain to reach that top, one more Everest to reach that dream. And as a 1K turned to 500 meters, 400 meters, 300 meters, I turned to that final corner, that final stretch. I could see the scoreboard, and I was about to hit the line. I broke cycling's cardinal rule, looked up at the scoreboard, and I saw I was second. I saw I just won a Paralympic medal. A childhood dream had just come true. And as I hit that line, tears started coming down my face, and the emotion enveloped me. And as I did my warm down, I had an hour till the medal ceremony. And I knew what I had to do at that moment. I knew who I wanted to thank. And communicating with my dad, I was able to find where they were in the crowd. I was able to hug him, celebrate him, but also find my mom and have a hug 27 years in the making, from July 6, 1997 to September 4th, 2024. And just being able to thank them for the work, for the dedication, for the support that they went through. Because when you win a medal like that, when you reach a moment like that, it's a community effort. It's the selfless sacrifices that so many people make that make it possible. And as I stood on that podium, embracing that medal, it was a feeling of $1 billion, but nothing could ever compare to that hug and that moment with my mom, with my dad. And as kind of the adrenaline and buzz of being at the race course kind of whittled away, it was time to go back to the village. And as I got back to the village, I knew who I wanted to thank. I knew who I wanted to give the time to. I quickly dropped my bag, secured my medal in my room in the dorm, and I went to the food hall. As a kid, my favorite food was pizza and cookies. And I knew what I wanted for dinner that night was some pizza and cookies to thank that 12-year-old, to thank that 13-year-old, to thank that little kid who went through those tough battles of mental health, of struggle, but pushed through, leading to that moment, and really giving that time to let that kid come out again. And as time kind of passed since that moment on September 4th, 2024, it's an appreciation and it's a realization of that selfless sacrifice that so many people do for us to reach our dreams. Hearing Mike's story and even Emily and Hannah's of pushing beyond that label, beyond who we are. It's amazing what can be done with that tenacity, with that grit, and just that grace too of embracing the journey, embracing the struggle, embracing the possibility that can come. Thank you for today.
Wow, Nathan, you truly overcame so many barriers that I don't think many of us realize. We never see those behind the scenes. So thank you so much for sharing that today. You guys are going to be sick of me saying I have goosebumps, but seriously, when you were sharing like that final moment, like I could feel it. I could feel how much that meant to you. And congratulations. A year later, I'm sure it still feels surreal. Well, if you were paying attention to Nathan's spiel, here comes your next question. Again, if you're just joining us, we're doing a prize draw at the end, which you're automatically entered into for the end of the call. But this time, the question is, in what year and city were the last Summer Olympics held? So drop that answer in the chat to get an extra entry into our prize draw. So in what year and city were the last Summer Olympics held? While you write that in, we're going to take a quick 7-minute break before our ambassador panel, and we will see you back here at 1:40.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back from our short little break. And for next up, we have our ambassador panel, which is called Living Beyond the Label. I personally love the name. And so we're joined by 3 ambassadors today, and in this session, we're going to dive deep into what it really means to live with a disability. We're going to hear from some of our Tru Faces ambassadors as they share their lived experiences and how they came to not only accept their disability, but to live confidently with it. Expect laughter, the cold hard truth, and a whole lot of OMG sayings. Whether you're disabled yourself, love someone who is, or just want to learn how to be a better ally, you'll leave with a deeper understanding of how we can show up better for ourselves and each other while challenging stereotypes and building positive relations. So today we have Jenna, Tyler, and Andrea with us. So we're going to start with some quick introductions, say your name, kind of how you got involved with Tru Faces, whatever you'd like. And let's start with Tyler.
Hi. Okay, so again, my name is Tyler Harris. I live with low vision. I lost my sight to a brain tumor about 15 years ago. I also live with like anxiety. I have borderline personality disorder, ADHD, OCD, and PTSD. I started this Tru Faces ambassadorship about 2 years ago now, and it's honestly been such a fun ride. I am a published poet. I've written a number of different pieces that have appeared in disability magazines and anthologies and things like that. I work as a support counselor at the School for the Blind here in Ontario, that Emily and Hannah mentioned. Yeah, that's the short little thing about me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. I'm going to pass it off to Andrea next.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Pacheco, and I am currently an accessibility consultant. And my past experiences, I have been a model, and I still continue to model. And I also compete at beauty pageants. I have a former title of Miss Canada United World 2024, and I am currently reigning as Miss Simcoe County International for Miss Northern International. So I'm constantly in the fashion industry, and we're going to talk about it. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm going to pass the mic on.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. And last but not least, we have Jenna.
Amazing. Hello, everyone. My name is Jenna, as Hannah said, and I'm a 21-year-old chronically ill, mentally ill, disabled queen, is how I like to explain it to people. I got some layers going on. I live with a rare form of juvenile idiopathic arthritis and fibromyalgia, which I was diagnosed with in childhood. I'm a septic shock survivor and live a life as an immunocompromised individual, which has been very interesting during the pandemic and post-pandemic times that we're in. I also live with mental illnesses and a learning disability. So as I said, there's a lot of layers to who I am. I've been in the disability healthcare advocacy space since I was 14 years old. So for almost 7 years, which is insane. And I've been involved with Tru Faces since 2022. So when I was 17, I got involved. And what got me to be involved with Tru Faces was really just, I learned about it through a friend that I volunteered with at the Children's Hospital at the time. And I really just aligned with their mission and their values. And I love writing and creating content. And I really feel like I've been able to grow those skills through Tru Faces. So I love being a part of this community. It's definitely super special.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenna. So let's dive right into it with our first question for Tyler. You have an acquired disability. Can you tell us more about that and how it impacted your educational journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lost my sight at 17 to a brain tumor. I had it had cut off all of the oxygen and the blood flow to my optic nerves. So by the time they removed the brain tumor, it was too late for my sight. I had been in my senior year of high school when this happened. So after my recovery, it took about 2 weeks or so till I was out of the hospital, and I went back to school to talk to the guidance counselors and the principals about, and the principal about my return. I needed 6 credits to graduate in order to graduate with my friends. And they told me that they didn't want me to take any more than 1 because they thought it might be too difficult for me. No one had ever tried to do 6 credits in 1 semester, and so they were very hesitant. They didn't have any of the relevant equipment. They also didn't have a full-time EA, which is what I would need as a blind, low vision student. So I fought tooth and nail to get them to agree to let me try to take the required number of courses to graduate with my friends. It was my first real experience with academic ableism. And as a disabled student, that has been the most difficult thing I've had to traverse. At every turn through my academic career, I have faced ableism because of my vision. I've had professors in university who didn't let me know ahead of time if we were having quizzes or tests, so that I couldn't go down to the disability center to have my tests done with a scribe. Sorry. I've also had to drop out of courses because of inaccessible materials, and it would take too long to put them in the right formats. So so having lived the first 17 years of my life as a non-disabled person, I have seen both sides of the coin at this point. I had my vision taken away in a matter of hours, and I have had to, and that has proved to be difficult. Oh my God. To be honest with you, it wasn't until I was told that I couldn't come back to school that I realized how badly I actually wanted to do school. So I ended up taking the 6 courses, and I graduated with my friends that June with honors. I didn't want everybody to move on without me, and I thought that it would be a little bit easier. It's not. I didn't realize how difficult the transition would be, but I had a lot of support from my family, my friends, and my newly appointed EA. I was now living an entirely different life that I knew nothing about, and I now had to do this as well as finish schooling. Academic ableism in high school prepared me for the post-secondary journey, because there have been far more hiccups during that period. I ended up with an undergrad and a master's in history from McMaster University. I wanted to continue to do a PhD in history. Sorry. But I was unable to do so because the required foreign language course wasn't made accessible for me. My textbooks weren't even going to be ready until far after midterms, so I wasn't able to take that course. I also needed a personal assistant in order to come with me into the archives and stuff, as they were not accessible, and I was not allowed to bring in some of my relevant equipment. The history department said that they didn't have enough funding, so that I would have to pay out of pocket for the assistant as well as for school itself. So because of this, I decided to take a year off, and that year happened to be the 2020 pandemic. I took the time then to really explore what I wanted to do, and I started researching different creative writing courses. I found one through the Humber School for Writers here in Toronto, and I ended up working with a Canadian author. Her name's Diane Shoreman, and she worked with me on my memoir. It wasn't until she read some of my poetry that was in it that she suggested that I look into schooling for my poetry. So I ended up in a master's level poetry program, and I am now I'm halfway through my PhD in creative writing.
Hi, Tyler. Sorry to cut you off, but I just want to keep going to make sure that we stay on time.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so thank you for that answer. I'm going to go on to our next question, which is for Andrea. Accepting disability can be hard. How do you avoid negative self-talk and foster a positive relationship with your body?
So accepting your disability is, I think, where we all need to start. And I think that that is probably where I am in my journey. That is the most important and empowering thing that I can share with other people is accepting your disability for yourself is really the first step in order to communicate to the outside world what you need and how you need it. And I think if we all take a step back and remember how that really feels, I have been disabled my entire life. So I was born this way. But in 2008, I had a very terrible car accident. And it changed my life forever because I had an acquired brain injury and then I had multiple injuries. I was no longer able to actually take care of myself. I had a 24-hour caregiver. I had a PSW. I had an RSW. And my life changed within seconds. It went from me having a physical disability that everybody could see to all of a sudden all of these other disabilities that nobody can see. And how do I navigate? How do I advocate? And more importantly, accepting those disabilities for me was really a really long journey. It took me over 5 to 6 years to really grasp what my new normal was. And I think I encountered ableism along the way, and it's really kind of shaped who I am today and why I became who I am today. And it really helped mold me into the powerful speaker that I feel that I am today. And the reason is because I've had these life experiences. So accepting my disability, especially with my brain injury, especially with the multiple things that are going on right now, like Jenna said, we're like an onion. We have multiple layers going on. I had spent a good time, maybe 2 or 3 years, where I was not able to be mobile. I was in a wheelchair. And then most of my issues were actually, I could not chew, spit, swallow, all of the things that most people do take for granted. And I got to be honest with you, this gave me a whole new perspective on life. So things that were probably taken for granted before my car accident, like getting up and going wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and not thinking about all of the layers that it would take me to accomplish this one task. Coming to terms with that changed everything for me. It helped me actually realize how strong I really could be and how my disability and even my invisible disabilities weren't actually holding me back. It was me. It was me who was holding me back. I was my worst enemy. And I think the negative self-talk was really what made or broke me back then. And I went through a lot of healing. I had to do some stress management. I did meditation. I did a lot of anger management. And I think that's the one that really gave me the aha moment. Because when I did anger management, I realized I was actually angry at myself. I was angry with myself for not accepting myself, for not starting whenever it happened. And I think the faster we deal with that feeling, that and sit with that feeling like, yes, this is what I have to work with, whatever that is for you, whatever that looks like for you. Um, the easier you can navigate from that and then turn it around and into a positive and empowering thing. For me, the way I did that was I went back to school. So in 2011 and 2012 and in 2013, I actually went back to school after my car accident. And this is what happened. I got into school. I won't name any schools or names or anything like that. But when I went back to college, I went to the disability support office and I thought, okay, great. They're going to help me. This is what they're supposed to do. This is what I'm going to have amazing support. What ended up happening, however, was I sat in front of the person in the disability support office and I explained to them how I wanted to be a chef for a hobby as a life skill because I had been through this traumatic car accident and had to learn how to literally do everything from scratch. So it was like being a newborn, right? I had to learn how to chew, spit, swallow, talk, do basic math. And it was like relearning everything, how to walk, how to talk. And I had to do this within 5 years, but I was set that I could go back to college. And he looked across at me and he literally was like, well, what are you going to do in the class? And I was so offended. I was like, I'm going to take the class. I'm going to participate in the class. And he again looked back at me and he was like, okay, so you're going to have someone else do everything for you? And I was like, absolutely not. I will have a worker with me because I had a rehab support worker who worked with me. But she was there as an EA, as a support role, not as someone who would do everything for me, AKA, why was I taking the class? And it was this
Hey, Andrea.
dismissive, sorry?
Sorry, I'm gonna have to cut you off again. As much as I really enjoyed hearing that story and it like got
That's
me
okay.
frustrated, I gotta go on to the next question.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you though. So the next one is for Jenna. So Jenna, your disability isn't visible. How does that impact your day-to-day life and people's perception of your disability?
It affects everything because I, don't look disabled. So when people see me out in public and I'm living my life, they don't know it. And I think there's pros and cons to that for sure, because I think it's very disgusting and awful, but in our society, people who have visible disabilities are sometimes not treated properly by other people. And that's how our society is built, and it sucks and it's awful. That's the way it is. So I recognize my privilege with that I live in a body that looks, able-bodied, whatever that's supposed to look like. As we know, disabilities are so varied and different, and there's so much to it. So there's that benefit to it, but also there's the downside of people not believing me. So when I try to explain to people my lived experience or my life, it's sometimes very hard for people to believe it. And also my disability is episodic. So if you don't know what episodic means, it means that some days of my life I can just be like go and completely fine and live a fairly normal life, whatever that means. And then I have days where I can't. So because that's episodic. I have my episodes, and some of them can be days, weeks, months, and then I have, really good days, weeks, months, and even years that I can have that are, better or worse because it is episodic. It's not the same all the time. And it can even change within hours. Like I can have a really crappy morning or a really good morning and then a better or not so good afternoon, just depending on how things are. It's very confusing, especially with my disability being one of them being an autoimmune disease. It affects my body in so many ways that science doesn't even really understand yet because it is a rare disease. So the research is very limited. So there's not even the academia to back me up, because a lot of people, if you're trying to explain to them your disability, especially within academic spaces, employment spaces, they want to see actual facts and paperwork, and a lot of them want to see, research studies or actual things. But when your diagnosis is so rare and there's nothing really to look off of, some people don't even believe you, and that can be really, really hard and really frustrating. I think the hardest part, is really in friendships, because it's hard for people to just understand. People don't like to see things that the people don't want to believe what they can't see, a lot of the time, and that can be really hard to like explain my lived experience. And also as I became an advocate, so being involved in disability spaces, and then even within the disability community, feeling invalidated because I'm able to walk 99% of the time. I'm able to do a lot of my own tasks independently most of the time. And people in the disability community who can't do those things might invalidate my experience, but that doesn't take away the times where I can't, or the things in my life that are challenging. Like I have a learning disability, and math is like a foreign language to me. And as we know, math is a huge part of the world. And I struggled with that my entire life. And that was a diagnosis I didn't get till grade 12. So I had to float my way through the public school system, not knowing anything about numbers or math, and feeling dumb, and teachers undermining me because they didn't understand the diagnosis. And still to this day, like especially with the physical stuff, like trying to explain to professors how things look when they just don't understand the diagnosis is definitely frustrating. And I feel like there's pros and cons to both. And society, this is why we have Tru Faces, and it's so needed. Society's not made for disabled people, but I think even more, it's not made for disabled people that don't match the look that we're supposed to have. You know what I mean? Because like they release, like a good example of this, they release a lot of like disability representative Barbies, which is like so awesome and cool, but a lot of them are for the visible disabilities. There's not a lot for like the invisible stuff, but like there really could be, because like there is mobility aids and there is things that I use day to day that support my well-being. So those would be really cute props for our Barbie one day. If Mattel ever sees this, I hope that they'll think about implementing that, because invisible disabilities are so valid, and I still live my life, and even just using the word disabled can be invalidating by some people sometimes, and it can be very challenging.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. I really loved your answer to that question. The next question is for Tyler again. So everyone has different coping strategies and methods that have led to disability acceptance in their life. Yours is poetry. How did poetry change your relationship with disability and empower you to share your story?
Yeah, well, I've always loved poetry. I've always been super interested in listening to poets and stuff like that. And it wasn't again until I was in the School for Writers that my mentor suggested that I look into the schooling for poetry. And I didn't learn about disability poetics until I was in my master's program. My supervisor, Dr. Angela France, she's also a published poet. She introduced me to one of the poets that I actually started reading his work. His name is Daniel Sluman. So I've read quite a few different poets that are disabled, Jennifer Bartlett, Kathy Wolf, Robert Duncan, and their work really opened my eyes to see that disability isn't really something that is inherently bad. So my disability, my blindness impacts my poetry, whether I'm explicitly or implicitly talking about it, because living in a disabled body that is in itself is resistant, it's resistance and it's liberation. And so I learned to accept my my blindness through the poetry that I was writing and reading. I am now in a group of other disabled poets, and we kind of share back and forth different little snippets of our pieces and things like that, and we ask for advice and stuff on different things. So I found that writing poetry specifically, it's given me a lot more of perspective, and so I, poetry. My blindness doesn't always show up in my poetry, but it's always there. Sometimes I use white space to show the struggle of the reading Braille and stuff and how long that takes. Sometimes I put in different little snippets of things that people have said to me, like, oh, I would never be able to have gone on like you did. And in putting these things into my poetry, I've really been able to explore my disabled identity. And I think intersectionality is really one of the things that I have been trying to work on, especially in my PhD right now, because my blindness impacts, how I feel about being a woman, and being a woman sometimes impacts how I feel about being queer. Sorry about that. And yeah, so I've been able to work my blindness into my poetry without it being implicitly there, because it's always in the background. And I have also realized that, like, I'm made up of so many different parts. I'm not just blind. I have other facets to my identity, and I think that having the space in poetry to actually explore that, explore what it means to live in a body that others deem lesser, has really it's really opened up my eyes and shown me that my poetry doesn't always have to be explicitly about my blindness, because my blindness is always impacting my poetry. And I have realized that that is the key to, my own struggles with coming to terms with my disability.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah.
I really like that answer. Okay, moving on to the next question. It is for Andrea again. So confidence can be difficult when you don't feel like you fit the norm. How do you embody confidence in your life, and what tips would you give to others who are trying to be more confident?
Thank you for the question. So, confidence is honestly earned, and I truly believe this. You have to earn your own confidence in order to spew it back out into the world, because I didn't feel confident because I was so busy giving myself so many self-negative talks and so many limiting ideas that I put myself in a jar with a lid, when in reality, it was me who just needed to stand up and realize that I don't belong in a jar. Do you know what I mean? In an analogy sense of the word, confidence is earned. You have to do something that really truly brings you joy and makes your soul come alive. For me, that is pageantry. That is walking in a fashion show. Those are little things that bring me joy. Baking brings me joy. So I really find solace. And if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like you're doing the work to earn these things. So when you earn that something that makes you feel good, it brings you confidence. And then you got to turn around and use that confidence like it's an ingredient in a recipe. And the recipe really is coming to terms with yourself, self acceptance, looking in the mirror. And I really think journaling and looking back at yourself. I did this a lot for after my car accident. I did not look like the same person, and so I had a really hard time accepting who was looking back at me in the mirror. So in therapy, I actually practiced quite a bit looking in the mirror and saying, I am beautiful. I am worthy. I can do this. No one's going to tell me different. I'm going to do what I want because that's what I want. So I think practicing this will really help your confidence. Find something that brings you joy and then run with it.
Absolutely. I love that answer. It's so important to practice that self-confidence, because like how can you expect others to do it if you can't do it yourself, right?
You have to love yourself first. Self-love, manifestation, journaling. And, like I love crystals. I love crystal energy. I think it's a really healthy way to just, meditate. You can always pick up a crystal if you need some help. I own Berry Goddess crystals. I can teach you about the crystals. And there are so many multitude of resources online. It's become super trendy to look into these wellness things, even things that you can do to bring your self-confidence, give yourself a makeover, go through your closet, give yourself a shopping day. And the rules are you can only shop in your own closet. Right. And this gives you confidence. Dressing better gives you confidence. You know, making sure that you're showered, your hygiene is a really big deal. And I know when we're suffering, at least for me, it was a really hard struggle to get through that part. And I've gone through depression. Getting up, taking a shower changes everything. It changes your perspective. Sometimes it really can help you from going from a bad day to a better day to a great day. So just giving yourself the confidence, the boost. For me, I'm like, hey, I'm not feeling good. A little bit of eyeliner and lipstick always does the trick for me, especially when I don't feel like being well put together because I'm having a really bad pain day, or because we have to deal with these things as disabled people, right? So confidence comes from within. You can earn it. Just find yourself something that brings you joy and then use it like an ingredient to the recipe of your life.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrea.
You're very welcome.
And the next question again is for Jenna. It can be difficult when you're going through a struggle that no one else can see. How do you get past the negative assumptions and reclaim your power?
Yeah, that's a loaded question for sure. I think in the past, when I was really young, because I grew up in a family where conversations about health or disability or those types of things was very taboo, which is very ironic because now that's spread, I've shared my story all over the internet and in spaces like this, just helped me a lot. But I really think that not hiding the really crappy parts, obviously privacy is so important to me, and still keeping super vulnerable parts of myself hidden is still a part of being a human and a person. But once I stopped letting shame overtake me and being embarrassed about the things in my life, having a learning disability, I know living with anxiety and panic attacks as a child and a teenager, I didn't want anyone to know. Even when my mom would talk to other moms or go to support group, I was just so embarrassed. Or even going to my therapists, like growing up in mental health facilities, like sharing those parts of myself was very shameful and embarrassing. I also lived with an eating disorder for many, many years, which still affects my life in some capacity, a lot less than it used to. But when I went through that journey and started my recovery with that, I was still so embarrassed and so ashamed to, share any of it. So I really think what's helped me refine my power and my confidence has been in advocacy and just opening up those parts of myself, because the truth is I'm not the only person experiencing these things, and they're nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed of. And the stigma is just very dumb in my opinion. Like, we're all human beings that have complex things going on in our lives. There's not any human being, I don't believe that there's any human that has had a perfect life and not a single struggle. And if someone, the stories I'm sharing, maybe it doesn't fully relate to someone, but it will help them relate to maybe someone that's in their life, or connect and learn about something new, because the things I'm dealing with, I do have a rare disease, but the big picture is that I'm not the only one with a rare disease, and the mental health struggles and learning disability are so common. There is millions of people around the world with the same sort of stories and situations and dealing with them, whether it's better or worse, depending on, where they live. So really just when I started sharing, and I realized that if I could reach out to even one single person and let them know that they're gonna be okay, that, that's my mission in life, is just to make people feel better. But also, because the stigma and the negativity and the embarrassment, and a lot of that just comes from because people aren't aware of things. We're not taught about a lot of disability or that kind of stuff at school. We're not taught how to, treat people with disabilities. We're told to treat them as normal people, but at the same time, we're not educated on, the history of disability, or on what actually living with a disability is like. It's just not embedded in the education system, not in Canada anyway, where I'm from. But if it's not part of that, so that's why people don't understand disability, because they weren't taught. They weren't taught that certain things are not appropriate or not okay. They don't know what ableism is. So if I can go out there and just educate the general public in some capacity on what my life looks like and other people's lives look like, I hope that that can make them kinder and nicer and more friendly. I know some people are going to turn a blind eye and they're going to hate everything I post, and they're going to think that I'm silly and dumb, but that's completely fine, because not every space on the internet is for everyone. But that was just my mission, and I really think that helped me step into my power and my confidence, because my favorite quote is, helping others helps you heal. And by educating and teaching and speaking and being bold and proud, I think I am helping some people out in the world. And I've had some great feedback from other warriors and just folks in the general community, which means so much to me. But also, sharing my story has helped me feel less embarrassed and just feel more confident and more me, because these are parts of my identity and I don't feel the need to hide them anymore. And I think storytelling is such a magical gift, and I'm so grateful that I get to share it with all kinds of people all the time. And anytime I'm in a space like this, I just feel so sparkly, because it is beyond special to share the parts of ourselves. And also, being a part of True Faces, I love that I also get to be a part of sharing other people's stories, because we're all connected in our little disability community, and I think that's so important.
That's awesome. I love that answer as well. Everyone has had such great answers so far, and it's like, oh, I always love hearing from everyone and chatting with our ambassadors. We always have such great discussions in our coffee chat meetings. So this is super fun. Okay, I have one question left, and it is going to go to, whoever, anyone or everyone, whoever grabs it first can go ahead. And the last question is, if you had one piece of advice or strategy for someone else who is struggling with self-acceptance, confidence, or negative self-talk, what would it be?
I think I'll take that one. I think the strategy is to disarm. I think the first thing you need to do is stand in your power and disarm that person. And the faster you disarm people, you make them realize that they are the problem and you in fact are not the problem. And you do that with kindness. Okay. So it's not supposed to be in a very negative tone. It doesn't need to be. It needs to be soft, and it needs to be coming from a place of understanding. And why do I say that? I'll give you a perfect example. I went shopping and I had a cashier who absolutely was very ableist and started screaming at the top of her lungs that I could not pack my own groceries. And to make the story super short, I pulled her aside and let her know that what she did was not only wrong, it was infuriating, it was embarrassing, it was condescending, and that not only was I going to speak to her manager, I was calling a staff meeting. And I turned that into a learning, teaching moment where I actually educated their entire staff on the floor, including their manager, and let them know how bad she made me feel. And I'm not that type of person who takes that and walks away. So I disarmed her, and then I turned it into a teaching moment. And in the end, I actually ended up getting hired as an accessibility consultant for that company. So do it with kindness, do it with humility, stand in your power, but know that these people that are doing these things don't always intentionally mean to do these things. So it really is a pivotal moment when you can turn around and turn that into a teaching moment, because that's what we're here to do. As a disabled content creator, as a disabled community person, I want to see everybody. The challenge is, I know it's going to happen to you, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going to get upset and do nothing about it, or are you going to turn it into a teaching moment so that the next generation has less of these moments? Because that's what we're here for. We can change the world one moment at a time. Thank you.
That's an amazing answer. Does anybody else want to add on to that?
Yeah. I was gonna say that I would say that learning to be gentle with yourself on the bad days as well as the good is it's definitely super important. And you can't let others dictate who you are. If I had listened to the guidance counselors at the very beginning of my journey with disability, I would have thought that it was a burden and that it's a burden that other people have to carry just as much as I do, which isn't true. And I would also say that I know that sometimes the negative self-talk can creep in because our universe, our world, our society is far more interested in quality or quantity than quality. And I would say that like you are allowed to show up just as you are, and that you don't have to let other people dictate what you can and cannot do. Yeah.
That's an amazing answer. We have 2 minutes left. Jenna, did you want to add anything onto that?
Yes,
as
of
well?
course. I think my very short ending to my presentation is just loving yourself can be like the hardest thing you will do. But I really think that we need to be best friends with ourselves, and society teaches us not to be that way. I am a people pleaser myself. My mom is a people pleaser. I get a lot of that from her, and also some stuff that I went through in my life. Very people pleasy. But at the end of the day, if you're not best friends with yourself, like that doesn't mean you don't love other people. I'm a people first person still, like in my job and in my life. But if you don't love yourself, then like realistically, who else is going to be there, you know? Like you have to spend the rest of your life with the person that you are. Like literally you cannot be exes with yourself. You have to be besties with yourself or you're going to have a miserable life. So just fall in love with the pieces of yourself that are good and the things that you do like, and day by day just take it one day at a time and show up for yourself, do things that you love, because you're only going to spend your life with yourself. So if you spend your life hating yourself, you're going to look back when you're 80 and I think have a lot of regrets, because if we don't love ourselves, then what's the point of all this at the end of the day?
That is lovely. Thank you again to all of our ambassadors, Tyler, Jenna, Andrea. You're all amazing. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your stories. And we appreciate all of your advice and your relatable moments, life tips, everything. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Emily to introduce our final speaker today.
Yay. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much to our ambassadors. We have such an incredible team. Before I introduce our last speaker here, our final prize question, again, if you're just tuning in, we're doing a prize draw right after Michayla's presentation for those who joined today. But if you're looking to grab a bonus entry, you can drop your answer to this question in the chat. Please tell us your biggest takeaway from the conference so far. Tell us your favorite or biggest takeaway from the conference so far to earn that extra bonus entry. Now, without further ado, Michayla Guidice is a neurodiverse student affairs professional, speaker, and soon-to-be mother, dedicated to building a lasting legacy of confidence and authenticity in her work and service. As the founder of Real Queens United and the host of Real Queens Revolution podcast, she empowers women and girls to grow their self-worth through actionable confidence, building lessons and tips for day-to-day life. Michayla has inspired over 2,000 people through speaking engagements and several Learning Disability Association chapters, including Ontario, Halton, Hamilton, and Windsor, Essex, and Pi Beta Phi. I'm probably saying that one wrong. Fraternity for Women, and has been featured in several international podcasts. Once told she wouldn't succeed in higher education, she's earned a bachelor's degree in education and now supports student success as a leading Canadian college, proving that determination and heart can break barriers both personally and professionally. Please help welcome Michayla.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I can't see y'all while I am presenting. So if you do have questions like Emily or Hannah, just feel free to flag me down throughout it. But I'm so honored to be here and just hear the inspiring stories of everybody and just why that they're here at this conference. My topic is really something that I've poured my heart, soul, and livelihood into. And I've done research, I've lived my life through this topic, and now I'm happy to be bringing it to the first Beyond the Label conference. So it is Hidden Not Broken, Reclaiming Confidence and Identity with a Hidden Disability. So I just want to confirm, if someone can verbally confirm, we are on the quote slide, that it worked.
Correct.
Amazing. So every keynote, before I even get started to know who I am, my story, and even the content that I present, I love starting things off with a quote. And this is actually something I said on my podcast very recently, and it's, confidence doesn't come from hiding who you are. It comes from embracing every aspect of you, whether that's good or the flawed. So obviously I'm coming at this of, everybody has flaws, but I come at it from a personal standpoint as well, where, we are our biggest critic. We are, our biggest roadblock in our success. So really confidence is all about embracing, quirks and all, flaws and all, and even your strengths to becoming the whole well-rounded person that you are. So who is this person who is giving this keynote? My name is Michayla Guidice. The short version of my story is I grew up with several forms of hidden disabilities, and it's basically the big topic that I've poured my heart and soul into. I was diagnosed with my first hidden disability at the age of 8 years old, and was told right then and there that I was a waste of space in the classroom and that I would never attribute to any form of success. I would never go on to post-secondary education because I was quote unquote not smart enough or didn't have the intellectual capacity to do so. And I've also been told that people with disabilities don't go to post-secondary education. So the best way to describe my reaction was I not only accomplished one post-secondary education, I accomplished 3, and now I work in the college and university sector. So right after, I was told that I was going to fail. So I failed grade 8. And I was told then that, my parents were told, you're enabling her by believing that she can go to college. So from grade 9 to grade 12, I knew that I needed to prove to people that I was not going to just be another student that was being torn down by the education system. And I knew that I wanted to be the change. So I first went and got my Ontario Social Service Worker Diploma at Humber College and became a registered social service worker. I then went on and did my Bachelor of Arts in General Psychology concentration from the University of Guelph. And my proudest achievement in education is I achieved my Master's of Education with a Student Affairs concentration from Wilfrid Laurier University. Like I said, I'm a huge hidden disability advocate. I'm somebody who does a lot of talks on autism and other disabilities. I have been a Tru Faces ambassador. Emily and Hannah can tell you the years. I cannot seem to remember how long I've been an ambassador. It's been quite some time. but I'm really like enjoying being in such advocacy spaces. I've been in research, so I've done a lot of disability research, looking at identity development through the life cycle of students, and really helping to shape the post-secondary sector. So my day job, I'm actually a student affairs professional at Mohawk College. So my career started in academic advising for students with varying abilities. So I would work with students who had workplace accidents and traumatic brain injuries, all the way to developmental disabilities, learning disabilities, and autism, and really helping them get through the school system and end up getting their diploma or degree at the end. I've done things in scholarship and retention initiatives. So, you know, how do we encourage students to stay in the classroom? And then now I'm actually stepping into a new role where I'm actually going to be leading student leadership at Mohawk College once I get back from my leave of absence. So I'm very excited to be starting in this new space. I'm an international renowned speaker and founder of Real Queens United. It is an empowerment program for women who are ready to step into their confidence, teach them about embracing their authenticity, embracing their story, and using their stories to really fuel the next evolution of their life. Like Emily said, I am the very proud host of the Real Queen Revolution on Spotify, where I continue this message. And a really fun fact about me is you've heard it all. There are a lot of pageant title holders in this space. So yes, I am one of them. And that's how I really got started with Tru Faces. So I'm a 5-time national title holder and the current reigning Canadian National Ms. Brantford 2026. So I will be competing for the title of Canadian National Ms. in July. And I'm also a mama to be. So I actually am expecting my first child in about a month, which is really exciting. So I first want to go over what is a hidden disability. And throughout my presentation, you'll find that I use the terms hidden disability and also invisible disability. In my terms, they're essentially the same thing. I use them interchangeably. So these are disabilities that you can't always see. And Jenna really, captured the essence of what a hidden disability is. And it's really ones that are oftentimes go unnoticed. So things, just as an example of a very short list, there are other disabilities out there that aren't on this list. And I want to recognize that I've only included just a few of them, but autism spectrum is one, ADHD, mental health, learning disabilities, and chronic illness. And oftentimes, like as people with hidden disabilities, we are told that, our disability, we have to validate our disabilities because and our accommodation needs, because you don't actually see the disability, like Jenna was saying. And I just want to remind everybody that hidden doesn't necessarily mean less. And we go through a separate, different things that we experience where maybe someone with a physical disability might not as well. So every disability comes with a different experience. And I just want to highlight that. And one thing that I've been told, and this was something that, somebody in my post-secondary journey really told me, was when you understand your challenges, it's the first step to owning your power. And I actually had that in university. So when I was in my bachelor's degree, I had a teacher who actually specialized in disabilities, and we pulled out our individualized education plans and our diagnostic material and really started a whole course basically to understand what our strengths were and what our challenges were so that we could be successful. So what I do want to highlight as well is that the weight of the hidden disability or the invisible disability. And a lot of people, I've had it in my career, I've had it in my schooling, I've had it in the pageant scene. People oftentimes doubt your struggles. They doubt what you're going through. They misjudge your abilities, or they overlook your needs. Like the amount of times that people are like, when I tell them what my disability is, they're like, oh, really? You don't look like somebody with that type of disability. So a lot of the times that people with invisible and hidden disabilities, we feel like we have to almost prove that we have a disability. And it's almost like their definition defines our worth, and their their way of interpreting it is determined by our worth, but that's not the case. Society has a great way of painting a very negative picture, and I wanted to remind you all that your worth is not defined by others' understanding about your abilities, and what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. So a little bit about quick touch point of my story. I've kind of gone into it a little bit, but growing up really through the school system, like I was always the type of kid that wanted to succeed. I was always really quiet, never really came out of my bubble, and really just felt like I was alone in the world going through the school system, especially elementary school. Looking back on this like photo of me, it actually makes me quite sad because I know that that little girl was really hurting inside, and she's only 5 years old. So I grew up almost like I had to mask who I was. And it really started like with being wrongfully diagnosed for so many years. So when I first got diagnosed, so I was on a wait list for years. So they put me on the wait list when I was in junior kindergarten. I wasn't formally diagnosed until grade 4. And when I was finally diagnosed, they said, oh, like learning disabilities, you have, specific learning disabilities, like severe learning disabilities in subject specifics, which if you can name every single subject you were taught in school, that was my learning disability. They told me I had a communication learning disability. So it really, like, being painted as being the kid with the disabilities going through school was really hard. And I felt like I had to really mask who I was to almost feel normal, and to almost like blend in with the crowd. And I wasn't actually, so I did a re-diagnosis. So when you go to college or university or any type of post-secondary education, they typically want you to have an updated diagnosis. So I did, and it came back as mild specific learning disability, with several different mental health diagnoses. We won't go into all of that, but basically about 1.5 years ago, my psychiatrist came back and was like, you know what, I think we might have been wrong a couple years ago. And they actually diagnosed me with being on the autism spectrum, which is like such a surreal feeling. And this whole process of going from, when I was 8 years old, having one diagnosis all the way until adulthood, it's finally, I getting a final diagnosis, and it's the correct one of, being on the autism spectrum, but also having somebody with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I almost felt like that whole process, I felt like I was misunderstood the entire time. And getting that diagnosis in adulthood, there came with a lot of different emotions. So the first one was like almost like a sense of relief and clarity, but a big part of me also grieved the version of me that I got used to, because I developed my confidence over so many years, and I developed my drive that when I was re-diagnosed, I felt like all the work that I'd done to really fully accept myself was kind of broken. So about 1.5 years ago, I really had to learn who Michayla was again, what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, and I felt like I had to go through life all over again with this newfound identity. And throughout this whole process, I was looked at as not disabled enough, but I was yet too different to be in, regular classrooms. So I was oftentimes pulled out of regular classrooms, put in special education classrooms, when I knew deep down that I knew I was so destined for so much more. So going from, elementary school, I failed every single grade. They didn't even want to send me to high school because they were like, there's no point in sending her to high school when she's failed everything. And I remember sitting down my first day of intake with the CERT, so special education resource teacher at the high school. And they said, like, to my parents that they need to stop telling me that I can go to college or university, because it's never going to happen. So, and I remember I was sitting outside the room in the hallway, and I was just in tears, because that was my biggest goal in life, was I wanted to go and get higher education. I love education. I love everything about it. So from grade 9 to grade 12, I got honor roll every single year. I graduated high school with a 99.8% average. In the college stream, and went on to college, got honors every year, and really started to go into this newfound identity after that experience. And that's when I really started to own my story even more, is when I was able to get into college and I got into university and I started to discover who Michayla was outside of the negative world that people place for people with disabilities. And it really shifted when I had my very first speaking engagement when I was at the University of Guelph. I was on the original planning committee for the mental health conference that they host every year. I got to share my story for the first time, and that started a career in public speaking, sharing my story. And it was all because I took the mask off, finally. So I've gone and done a lot of research around, disabilities, hidden disabilities, and confidence and all those things. But throughout my professional experience, but also my personal experience, kind of developed this threshold. So all of our lives as people with disabilities, we're told to mask so that we can fit in to be normal. So there's like this certain threshold that is always, masking our identities, not being, not living life who we actually are. And that causes a lot of burnout and exhaustion. And we're stuck in this time period of like a loss of identity and the struggle with self-worth, like really struggling to understand who we are, and really celebrating ourselves. Then where masking kind of, if you picture a line, you have masking here and you have confidence here. That line of when you pull the mask off and you start living your life according to the way you want it to go, according to your rules, and you set those boundaries, you really step into who you are and celebrate your identity, that's where confidence begins. And I truly believe that this is something that is so life-changing, because in that turning point, when you're going from masking your identity to full-blown confidence, I found that I started seeing my disability in a very different way. When I was masking my identity, I felt broken, and I felt like that something was wrong with me all the time. So I started to find that when I was in that turning point of shifting into my full confidence, I started finding spaces where I could really be myself. And that really started with, like, I'm also a Tru Faces ambassador. So, getting into a space where, if I need to stim, or I need to run around, I need to, I do this thing where I like flap my arms a lot just to get the energy out, because I feel like I'm suppressing my energy. I found that these types of spaces actually helped me to grow into my most confident self. So that was through my community, that was through Tru Faces, that was through pageantry, where I got to explain who I was, represent Canada 4 times on the international stage, and really getting to expand my advocacy even more allowed me to gain my voice and gain my confidence back. And really, that reclaiming my identity, I started really embracing who I was. And how I did this was I started accepting my neurodiverse strength. So every single year around Christmas to New Year's, I look at my diagnosis and my IEP from years ago, and even the ones that I have now, and I start highlighting all of the strengths that I have. And I start really celebrating the strengths that I do have, and no longer focused on the weaknesses. Because I found when I was dwelling on the weaknesses, I was almost suppressing my confidence. And again, I almost felt like I had to mask those weaknesses because of my disability. Another big one is I stopped apologizing. And I'm with a partner who is not neurodiverse. And I used to apologize for everything. Like if I was running around the house, if I was stimming a lot, I would be apologizing for that. And instead of suppressing that energy and stopping and being ashamed of that, I actually started posting it on social media, and people started to love it. And now I'm like stepping in fully, leaning into my authenticity. And I encourage all of you to kind of do the same. Lean into your quirks, lean into those moments where you can be your authentic self. So 3 keys to confidence when you have, you know, this could even apply to any disability, but the first one is self-acceptance, like really owning your story without shame, being, you know, stepping into and not apologizing for your story or not apologizing for being too much. You know, embracing your authenticity, embracing every aspect of who you are, whether that is the things that you see are really good about you or the things that, you know, you're like, oh, I wish I never had that. Stop hiding those parts that make you unique. And the final one is, we've talked a lot about advocacy in this space today, and I truly believe this is the #1 skill that everybody with a disability needs to start learning, is speaking up for your needs. But also, when we're speaking up for our needs, we're speaking up for others. When I was going through my education and even into my professional career, people were saying like advocacy is such a weakness. Like sharing my voice, sharing my story, advocating for my needs was such a weakness. It was such a bad thing. Like I remember like one of my grandparents was like, oh, don't say that you have autism because that's a bad thing. And I realized that like my disability, advocating for my disability, advocating for who I am, really helped me build my confidence. And it was almost this sense of strength. So I want you to always remember, like, asking for what you need not only proves to yourself, but it also proves to others that your voice matters. So I know that embracing yourself can sometimes be really difficult. And like, you know, a lot of us researchers are always saying, oh, just embrace yourself. And people are like, well, how do I do that? I wanted to kind of take some 5 ways that I, in my journey of self-accepting myself again when I got my autism diagnosis, that really helped me step into this full version of Michayla. Because before I started leaning into my strengths, I could tell you I was not living the life that I knew that I could. I wasn't, you know, having speaking engagements like this, owning my own business, you know, having the career that I have in student affairs, getting my education, because I felt like I was always masking. So these are kind of 5 things that I want you to kind of start practicing to really start embracing yourself. And the first one is practice unmasking in very safe spaces. So I know that if I'm running around the house and I need a dance party, I can fully do so and not feel judged for it. So really start in those small spaces where you can really start embracing those quirks about you. And that leads me to my second point of celebrating your differences as part of your identity, and also celebrating your strengths. So by me going on my diagnostic materials every single year, I look at all of the very good qualities that I have and all the positives. And I really start celebrating myself, and I keep that list with me everywhere I go. Also, really big one is surround yourself with people who see your worth. Like, I cannot tell you enough, like, how important it is to surround yourself with people who are going to uplift you. And that, for me, that was Tru Faces, that was pageantry, that was in my career, where I really started to be with people who saw me for Michayla instead of seeing the disability. And then number 4 is replace. So a lot of the times I've felt this. I don't know if anyone else has felt this, but sometimes we get so into our head about what's wrong with us. I've always, like, the amount of times I've like yelled at myself about like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I process information? Why can't I make eye contact with people? Like, why do I feel like I'm always suppressing who I am? And I started shifting that of what are my strengths. So when I'm having a really, really hard day and I cannot control my stims, I look at everything that makes me strong, and I refer back to those strengths that were outlined in my diagnostic material to make me feel good. And even if you're somebody who's doesn't have a formal diagnosis yet, because I do recognize that some people are still going through the process of gaining their diagnosis, go ask people, what are your strengths, to have this practice. So I actually started going to like my parents and asking them. I asked my partner, David, and then I also went to social media, because I'm really big on social media, and asking people like, what are the strengths that they see in me? And I use that when I'm feeling really down about myself. And the last one, I'm going to say it again, but advocate for your needs. That's in school, that's in work, that's in relationships. Put up those boundaries when you're not feeling comfortable. And I want you to remember that every time you advocate for yourself, you reinforce the self-respect that you deserve, and you're building the confidence that you deserve. So I recognize that maybe there's people on this call that might not have a disability, and I wanted to kind of rewire some maybe assumptions. And I want, if anyone's, kind of here more of a support role, is just rethink some of the assumptions that you have. And I actually asked some of my family and some of my friends, what are some assumptions about disabilities that you have? And they kind of gave me some answers, and that's what really formed this slide. So I want you all to remember that not all disabilities are visible, and believe what people share about their experiences, because every single you could have two people with the exact same diagnosis, but their experiences are vastly different. So I just want to recognize that regardless of if you have 10 people with the same, if we have 10 people here that all have autism, we all have a very different experience, and believe that each one of our experiences is valid. And I also encourage others to show up with authenticity, but also encourage yourselves to show up with authenticity, and start, when you're starting to second guess and starting to feel uncomfortable, that is that zone that you are starting to step into your confidence when you start feeling that uncomfortable feeling. So start challenging yourself to really step outside the box, and use outlets that are creative, or anything that really kind of gets you into that comfortability mindset. Mine is really social media. So I share a lot of what I'm going through on social media. So if I'm having a bad day, I'll make a podcast episode. Or I know from my mom, who also is neurodiverse, my mom uses art. My sister uses music. My other sister uses film. My brother uses sports. So we all have something that we can channel to really embrace ourselves, but also help us in those really hard times. So I want to kind of leave time for also some questions, if anybody had any, but I want to leave you all before I kind of end with a question. You don't have to answer it now. You can take several days, but I really want you to think about, where in your life are you hiding parts of yourself? Where do you feel like there's almost like a block that you can't step into your full authentic self? For me personally, I still kind of feel it sometimes, is sometimes through work, or even through pageants. I can give you an example. Because I'm somebody on the autism spectrum, certain stimuli really affect me. So sometimes when I'm in the pageant zone, when I'm competing in person in a pageant, I really start to suppress my stimming. I try to act like things don't bother me, but sometimes they do. So that's one more area where I feel like I'm still hiding a part of myself, is when I'm backstage getting ready to compete, because I feel like I can't stim out like I would like to. And then the other question I have is, how would your confidence grow if you embraced this version of you? So if that situation of where you're hiding part of yourself, if that was no longer there, how would your confidence grow, and who would you be if you had no limitations on you? So I know that there was probably a lot of teaching in there, a lot about my story in there, but if you can take anything away from my presentation in particular, the number one thing is, confidence isn't about absolute perfection. It's embracing every aspect of who you are, flaws and all. And disabilities aren't something to hide, it's something to honor and to celebrate. So if you have any questions that come up after this presentation, after this conference, you can find me on Instagram at Real Queen Michayla. I am very active on that account. So if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out. If you're not someone who's on social media, I can also be reached at resiliency-speaks@gmail.com. And then if you're interested in tuning in to the podcast, so I produce every single week, I produce an episode. So I've had, Jenna's been on my podcast so far. So I have guests who come on and they share their stories, share their teaching moments about stepping into their confidence and authenticity. And then I also have unfiltered episodes of me just ranting about the topic for the week. So you can catch me at all three of those, but I just wanted to, again, thank, Tru Faces for having me, but also giving us the space to come together and really celebrate all of our disabilities and our abilities. And then also thank you for staying tuned if you're still here, and then, listening to all of us speakers, because sometimes it can be really nerve-wracking to come in front of a whole bunch of people. So I just wanted to thank you all so much for your time, and I think we have a couple more minutes left, so I'll answer questions in the chat if there's anything else.
Thank you so much, Michayla. That was truly so incredible. And you've definitely got me thinking now, even with that final question. And as you were talking about masking, like, I don't necessarily consider myself as somebody who's doing that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like there's actually so many things I do because I think it's the norm or the typical. And so I think even like that self-reflective piece is really important. So thank you so much for sharing your insights on all of that.
Raise it all.
All right, so we are just going to wrap up here in a minute. I would like to say a huge thank you to all of our presenters today who took the time to put together these wonderful presentations and really think so critically about what the phrase beyond the label meant to them. Each and every one of you touched on it in such an important way that has us thinking beyond, what is my identity and how do I present myself to the world and how does the world see me? And I think it was such a great conversation and such an important topic to talk about and just, make people more aware. And then like we had just there, like even that self-reflective piece of how do I want to be, maybe a better advocate for either myself or others? How do I want to, empower others in my advocacy? And I know personally I'm walking away feeling very, very refreshed and very energetic about the conversations that we're having after this. So I mentioned in the beginning, there's lots of ways to get involved in the Tru Faces community. Being here is a great start. Outside of our virtual programming, we do have more coming, conference aside. We encourage you all, if you are somebody with a disability, please feel free to, and empowered after today, to come and share your story with us on our page. All of the projects and information I'm going to share can be found on our website, trufaces.ca. Hannah's going to pop the link in the chat. But one of the tabs in there is Get Featured, where you send us a few photos and a caption about you and your story, and we'll put it up on our page, again, creating that sense of community and camaraderie. We also have our ambassador program. You saw many of our lovely individuals today who are incredible speakers, and I'm so thankful to have a part of our Tru Faces family. But if you're interested in getting more involved in advocacy and awareness with Tru Faces and want to share more of your story, that's a great place to start. Again, our ambassador program tab on our website. Like I said, there will be other events upcoming in the future. Stay tuned on social media for that. One other plug, our newsletter. We have a quarterly newsletter with all things Tru Faces, information, upcoming programs, things we've been working along, ways to get involved. That's linked at the bottom of our website if you're looking to keep caught up with all the things we're doing. Our next edition will actually be released October 1st, so in less than 2 weeks. So there'll be lots coming your way then. We also encourage you to shop products if you're looking to start conversations around disability awareness, or if alternatively you'd like to see more of our presentations similar to this, feel free to connect with us under partnership opportunities. So lots of ways to get involved in the Tru Faces family. We love seeing you guys keep involved. But finally, the one we've all been waiting for. Thank you all for being here today. And as mentioned, throughout the conference, you've been entered into a prize draw. And we have pulled that name during Michayla's presentation. And our tote bag and sticker prize pack is going to go to Mary. I don't think they're here anymore, but that is a-okay. We will reach out to them via email to confirm that they have won. So thank you truly, all of you, for being here and for making this event happen, presenters and attendees alike. It means the world to us that we're able to share this kind of content and continue advocacy on small and large scales. So thank you all for being here, and I'm sure we'll connect with you all offline. So thank you.